Hi, everybody. In this second video on Plato, I want to talk to you about two very important ideas in Plato's work. I want to address his theory of the soul, or his psychology. In case you didn't know, our word psychology comes from the ancient Greek word psyche, which means soul, because for most people in antiquity, our mind is our soul. It's the same thing. So I want to address that, Plato's psychology. And I also want to address Plato's theory of the state, right? His politics, his political ideas. And believe it or not, these two things have a lot in common, right? Plato's psychology with his theory of the state. But I like to start with a statement. Let's say, okay, Plato was a rationalist. That's right. Now, what is a rationalist? Well, a rationalist is somebody who believes that the universe is rational. There is a rational, logical structure in the universe, in reality. And therefore, the, the proper, perhaps the only way to fully understand the world is through our reason, right? That's why that might identify somebody as a rationalist. But there's another thing, a very important thing, and is that rationalists believe that ideas in our mind, in our reason, are more real, more important, more fundamental to reality than the actual visible things we can see and touch. Okay, this is something I addressed in the previous video in Plato's theory of the forms, how it sort of makes sense to think that in some context, at least in some examples, some cases, it makes sense to think that ideas are prior to the things, to the visible things. For example, I gave you the example of the building, right? Prior to the building that you see, there was the idea of the building in an engineer's head, right? And that pretty much applies to everything around you, everything that was designed, that was produced, made by people. Same thing. Everything you see around you prior to the existence of the thing that you're seeing, the screen, your computer, whatever, there was the idea, right, in someone's mind, the design. So, yeah, I mean, many philosophers today think that Plato's theory of the forms is just absurd. It's crazy to think of ideas being more real than the visible things. But again, though I don't endorse Plato's theory of the forms, I see that it has a point. In the previous video, I also mentioned the idea of love, right? How for most people in the world, love is a real thing. But where is it? Can we study love scientifically, objectively? Many people would say, no, love is an subjective thing. It's just an idea, a social construct. Yeah, and yet it's so important. Love seems to make everything happen, right? Love moves the world. It's something I said in the previous video. It's very, very important. So we might think that love is real. It exists in some way. In what way? Just like the idea of the square root, remember? How can we be skeptical about the idea of the square root being something real? But in what way real? Well, Plato would say in the most important fundamental way. The idea of the square root is more real than all of the visible things that you can see. So that's what it means to be a rationalist. Somebody who believes that through reason you understand the reality of the world, everything, and also you believe in ideas. Ideas are more important, more real than the things that we see. Now, take a look at the screen, right? We have a couple of very important illustrations we'll be using in this video. The first one on the left, it's a part of a painting, very famous painting by Raphael, a painter during the late Middle Ages, Renaissance, probably. In this famous painting, you see all the most important philosophers of antiquity, and here you see Plato and Aristotle. right? Plato on the left, Aristotle on the right. As you might know, Aristotle was a disciple of Plato, and um, and you can see in the illustration Plato being the older guy. But there's a very, very important detail in the illustration that I want you to keep in mind. The fact that Plato is pointing upward, right, with his finger, because he was a rationalist, right? Because he believed that the real things are up there in some world of ideas, in the world of forms, in some heaven. And that's where we should be looking at. Always, we should keep our minds focused on the world of ideas, the world above. Think about that, right? For later, the top, right? The world at the top. That's the world of ideas. That's the real deal for Plato, and which is what made him a rationalist. Okay, let's hold that thought because I want to start with the other illustration. I want to continue with the other illustration. I meant to say I want to start with the theory of the mind, Plato's psychology. So the second illustration on your right is an illustration of the myth of the charioteer, which is basically a metaphor. Plato uses this metaphor in one of his books to illustrate the structure of our psyche, of our thinking, of our mind. And and it's something like the illustration. Our mind is structured like having three very, very important components. A charioteer guiding two horses. And one horse is a good horse, the other horse is a bad horse. Okay, so the bad horse is like our, how can I say, instinctive, is the instinctive part of us. Okay, the more biological part of us has to do with desires, appetites, pleasure, that sort of thing, right? Our most animalistic part of ourselves, of our psyche, and that's the bad horse. And then there is a good horse, which is for Plato the spirited part of our psyche, and this part of our psyche, it's a good part. Again, it's a good horse that pursues what is noble, what is beautiful, right? Has that natural inclination to for what it's good, what it's beautiful. Do you remember in the previous video I said that, well, Plato said that we're all lovers and this is why we pursue wisdom? So that would be the good horse that wants to pursue what's right. And then the charioteer is the rational part of our psyche, okay? The one that guides. And this is the part of us that understands the world, the rational part, right? Understands the ideas and dialectic and all that stuff, right? Mathematics. And this is the one that has to control our lives. Our lives must be guided by our rational, the rational part of us. In case this doesn't make sense to you, okay, think of, let's say, for example, you're trying to lose weight. Okay, you're overweight. And you think this is what you should do for the sake of health, right? That's a good thing. That's a noble thing. So maybe your good horse is telling you, your good nature is telling you, hey, you're overweight, you're having a difficult time just moving, and you're not as agile as you used to be. So you have to stop eating. You have to cut in your food intake, and okay, but all of a sudden, a family member comes home with pizza. And man, that pizza smells great. And then there is a conflict with it, right? You really want to eat, you really want a slice of pizza or two, right? Or three. And the conflict inside of you is, well, precisely the good horse and the bad horse, right? The good horse, the good part of you wants to lose weight, pursue what's right. But then the instinctive part of you wants to eat pizza. That's the animalistic part of you, biological part of you, whatever way you want to call it. But you understand what I'm saying. That's the part that has to do with appetite, desires, and pleasure seeking, and that sort of thing. The bad horse. So there's this conflict inside of you. Well, you should listen to the voice of reason, Plato would say. Now that you understand ideas, lower forms, which is science, and then higher forms, you have this picture very clear in your head because you're a rational person, right? You're a philosopher, you're a thinker. You should know what to do. So Plato says that the good horse, the spirited part of us, can be corrupted by bad influences, bad education, and it might make it more difficult for some individuals, right, with that background, coming from whatever a dysfunctional family, trauma. It might be more difficult for these people to live a good, meaningful life, to be guided by the rational part of their psyche because of that background. Now, in case you're thinking, okay, this is absurd. Okay, now our mind is like this illustration that we see on the screen. Let me tell you though, that a very important, perhaps the most important psychologist of all times, perhaps the most influential, Sigmund Freud. His approach to or his theory of the mind is somewhat similar, though. I mean, for Freud, the mind is sort of also divided in different things. Actually, you can even say three things: the ego, the id, and the superego. And to that, I think we should add the subconscious. But anyways, it's very similar. Freud would say there's the id, part of our psyche, the structure of our psyche. And it's the same thing. It's the part of it that has to do with our instinctive nature, pursuing pleasure, that sort of thing. That's the id. And then there's the ego, which I think can be compared to the good horse, that probably because of education, good and bad influences and stuff, you might you might have an idea of what's good. You're trying to pursue what's good, but sometimes you can't. And then there's the for Freud, the superego, which is for Freud something like a moral conscience. And maybe I can compare that to the uh, to the rational part of the soul. Okay, it doesn't matter. Maybe the comparison won't hold, but my point is, Freud produced something similar, right? He sort of, he did not use an illustration like the one you see on the screen, but he came up with an explanation that was somewhat similar, like dividing the psyche into this competing forces within, and that made a lot of sense to many people still today. And um, and I'm sure there are some psychologists out there who practice psychoanalysis, and they are big, I don't know, fans or followers of Freud. So not altogether crazy, this way of understanding our psyche, our minds. But let's move on to Plato's theory of the state, because this is the really important part of the video that I would like to address. Well, it's no mystery. Most people know, they're familiar with Plato's theory. And according to Plato, well, to have an ideal state, you should be able first to divide people into three groups because you're using your reason, right? Once you understand higher forms, you're a philosopher, right? And you understand the world of ideas and you're super smart. You'll see that the best model of government is one in which people are grouped into three groups. Um, the what he calls I'm looking at the textbook that I'm using for my class, the Great Conversation. Let me just actually read it to you about the three groups of people. Some would be best fitted to be laborers, carpenters, stonemasons, merchants, and farmers. These can be thought of as the productive part of the community. They correspond to the part of the soul called appetite. That's the bad horse. Number two, others who are adventurous, strong, and brave will be suited to serve in the army and navy. These form the protective part of the state, and they correspond to spirit in the soul, the spirited part of us, the good horse. Finally, the few who are intelligent, rational, self controlled, and in love with wisdom will be suited to make decisions for the community. These are the governing part of the state. Their parallel is in the soul is reason. A basic principle for Plato's ideal state is that there are only a few who are fit to rule: the philosopher kings, the intellectuals, philosophers who understand the world of the forms and understand reality as it is. So, okay, so Plato thinks this is the ideal way of organizing the state. This is how it should be. It must be if you use your reason, if you understand higher forms and so on in dialectics. So he was able to produce this theory. And boy, okay, this theory of the state found in the Republic, it's actually the very first theory of the state produced. And it is one that is a ideological, because it's a top-down theory of the state. Here, friends, I want to introduce a very, very important distinction that I often mention in my classes: the distinction between top-down and bottom-up. Okay, we can see it in two different ways. Society is developing naturally, organically. That's the bottom up or the ground up development, the natural organic development of societies. And then there is a top down approach or development of societies. And that's when, from the top of your head, your ideas, you come up with a theory like Plato did. You know, in your head, up here, you you see and you try to analyze the state and what's going on in the country, the economy, people, how they work, and you're thinking what is the ideal model to organize ourselves into a beautiful, great state. So you produce the theory, and once you have the theory in your head, you try to implement it. So that's what Plato did. Plato provided the theory, and he was, I guess, waiting for somebody to implement this, some king or something like that. Uh, that's all it took, basically, after Plato was done with his theory. Okay, just now it takes somebody to put it in practice. Well, to put it in practice means to organize a society, a state, in a top-down way. We start with a theory, and with the theory, we organize everything right from the top, the state, political leaders, officials, and you keep going down till you reach the level of people. Okay, just people like you and me. Um, so Plato thought, okay, yeah, we need three groups of people in this ideal state: people who are dedicated to protect the state, and those are the spirited part of the psyche. People who know what it's noble, who pursue whatever the right thing, and fight for justice and so on. Those people should be in charge of protecting us. And then the philosopher kings, the rational people, they should rule. And then the everybody else, like the bat, horse, right, the animalistic, instinctive part of society is made up of people who just make things, farmers and workers and people who produce items and so on and so forth. So this is the how the ideal state resembles the structure of the mind. Once again, once again, uh, Plato's theory was the first theory, and it's a top-down theory of the state. And but I contrasted that, and I contrast that with a bottom-up theory or bottom-up development of societies, bottom-up development of the state. And I discovered this recently reading Alexis de Tocqueville, Democracy in America, which is a classic. I mean, if you're studying political science, I'm sure this is a book that you're going to have to read or study at some point. Tocqueville's Democracy in America, and Tocqueville wrote this book in the 1800s. Prior, if I'm not mistaken, that was prior to the Civil War. And you can reading this book, you can fully understand how in America This is Tocqueville's point. Democracy, the institutions of government, evolved in a organic, natural, bottom-up sort of way, beginning with the township. So people in early America organized themselves into townships, into little communities. As soon as there was enough people living in the same area, region, right, and understanding, okay, the best way to survive would be to work together, and they started organizing and coming up with uh, laws and that sort of thing. Then those principles of the township, those institutions, ideas, then they, with those ideas, they established um, counties, and then counties established states, and then the states established the federal government. That it's the bottom up. I mean, you can see the development, right? From the bottom to the top of the government, to the federal government. So Tocqueville would say this is how democracy unfolded and evolved in the United States in this very neat bottom up organic way in which the principles agreed on and principles and laws that were evident to the community, to people like you and me, okay, those principles served to establish more complicated forms of institutions, right, and structures within our society. Again, counties, states, and federal government. So that, I would say, I would argue, is the ideal way of coming up with theories, the ideal approach to analysis, the ideal approach to theory making. It has to be bottom up because the top down approach, Plato's theory, being top down means only one thing, that it's ideological and is totalitarian. Yes. And this is not my discovery. I actually made this discovery when I read Karl Popper's book, The Open Society and Its Enemies. Okay, another classic in political science that maybe you'll have the opportunity to read. But I would say many intellectuals agreed when they read Popper's book that Popper was able to expose Plato as an ideologue, as a totalitarian thinker, at least when it comes to politics, when it comes to his theory of the state, right? He was a totalitarian thinker because his theory was so top down, right? I mean, yeah, I mean, think about the whole idea, right? Okay, so we're going to group people in three, right? Three groups of people. Who is to do the sorting out of people? Who is to determine, okay, you are meant to be a laborer and you are meant to be a guardian of the state. You're meant to be a philosopher. So who's going to do that? And people who are, let's say, laborers, that is the productive part of the state, what are the chances for them to move up to or transfer, change to another category? Like, what are the chances for them to do the work of the guards, right, to protect the state? And how likely it is for people who protect the state to become leaders, those philosopher kings? It seems to be a model that requires a lot of force, and that's why um, Popper was correct in identifying the totalitarianism in Plato's theory. But this is the main point I want to make in the video, friends. That it's always the case when you come up with a top-down theory, when you have a top-down way of looking at things, analyzing things. And this is incredibly common, sadly, maybe even tragically common today. People who have these ideas of how the government should run, how the country should be. People saying things like, we should have a socialist government, for example. um, and we should make the rich pay more in taxes, and billionaires should not exist. Let me tell you this. If you agree with those ideas, let me just tell you this. Um, Karl Marx, came up with probably the most famous theory of government, idea of government, that is an absolute top-down idea, top-down theory. It is absolutely top-down. What do I mean? Marx in his head thought, when I look at history, I just see the same thing. The oppressed versus the oppressors. You see the same tension, and history can be seen as the history between the fight between the powerful and the less powerful, or the powerless. So that's it. That's all. That's the way you have to look at history, and you have to look at politics. You have to look at society, political societies today, rich versus poor, and this is his idea, and he thought about ways to reorganize the society, right, in an ideal way, the communistic way, in which there is no private property, and there are no inheritance rights, and the means of productions are in control. They're controlled by the workers. And so he thought, okay, this is the ideal way of living. And here's the theory. Now we need somebody to put it in practice, and that somebody was Lenin, I guess, in the Soviet Union, and then later Mao and Fidel Castro in Cuba, and so on. There's just a few cases of communist systems, but it's an absolute top-down model. Um, yeah, I think this is what society needs. Yeah, we need something like redistributing the wealth, and we're going to do it through taxation, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that. Now I have the theory, I have the idea. Let's implement it. Let's find somebody who is willing to run it, right, and run for office, which is what's happening today. That's not the best way, friends. And I'm sorry if you disagree, but the ideal way is the organic way, the bottom up way. And I'm willing to prove to you why this is the right way. This is the healthy way, the bottom up, ground up way. Because in reality, this is how things have proved to work. Like in America, according to Tocqueville, uh, things developing, evolving organically at a ground level, at our level, a level in which some things are evident to all of us, to just common people, not philosophers, just to you and me. Things that are evident to you and me. Try, try to run this experiment so you see what I'm trying to say. Try to organize a group of people and try to form some sort of club or organization. Okay, whatever. Let's say you want to organize a philosophy club. Okay, let's say that this is your goal, and you reach out to people like you, maybe students, or if you're not in school, just try to organize some sort of club, right? The Carolina Panther fan club of Charlotte. Try to do it. And once you're able to gather people who want to be part of the organization, right, who are like-minded, now try to establish some rules for everybody, for the organization. Okay, I am absolutely sure that if these rules are not modeled after the idea of equality, you're not going to have a big success organizing your club or your organization. And by that I mean what? Imagine you have to, or not just imagine, run the experiment. Try to make people now, okay, you have a group of people, you want to form your organization. Now tell them, okay, we need funds to support ourselves, so everybody is going to contribute $5 a month to sustain the organization. And okay, that's going to open a debate. Some people are going to say, no, that's too little. Other people will say, no, that's too much. But try to have that conversation, right, with the people you're trying make an organization with. I'm sure at some point you guys are going to agree on something. Maybe, okay, let's make it $3. $3 a month. Everybody pay $3? Okay, everybody, fine. That's equality. That it's a principle that is evident to everybody at a bottom level, a ground level. And because you understand equality works at a bottom level, then you can use the same principle to establish more complicated structures within your organization. That's sort of the bottom up development. That's how things evolved in the United States according to Tocqueville. The principles of the township were used to organize counties, and then counties, the principles of the counties to organize states, and then the federal government, and so on. So these principles that we're using in our federal government must be justified at a bottom level, which is why in our federal government we have laws that they're committed to equality, right? Again, equality is an evident bottom-up principle of justice in government. Now, imagine going back to the experiment, right, of your organization. Let's say you are somebody who believes in socialism, you believes in the redistribution of wealth and that sort of ideas, right? Try in putting together your organization, try to make people pay a fee, a membership fee based on their income, based on their economic status. Try to do that. Try to tell some people, hey, because you're driving a very, very nice car, you're driving an expensive car, you're not gonna pay $3 membership fee. You're gonna pay five, or you're gonna pay six because you can afford it. Try to do that. And because you don't have a job and you're broke, you're just gonna pay $1, maybe nothing. So some people in your organization will pay $6 membership fee, other people will pay five, other four, others one, others none. Try to see if you can successfully put together an organization under these principles. And I can guarantee you, some people are going to feel like they're going to feel taken advantage of. People of better economic status are going to go like, you know what, I have to pay more? Like, okay, bye. I don't want to be part of this. I don't. Because at a bottom level, it's not evident that this is fair, that this is good for the society, for the organization. It's just not. At a bottom level, friends, you will never ever morally justify demanding some people to give more or to do more. That is a top down idea. Top down. Here, saying, yeah, rich should pay more in taxes. They should pay far more. Billionaires should not exist. We're going to tax them till they don't exist anymore. And we're going to redistribute this wealth so it reaches the people at the bottom. Yeah, it sounds great. Sounds great. Sounds beautiful. Maybe as great as Plato's theory. Sounded great to Plato. Um, but it's a theory, number one. It's a top-down theory, number one. Number two, it's ideological, obviously ideological. And number three, it's something that in order to be put in practice, you need totalitarianism. You need to force people, compel people to give more, pay more. Um, I learned from a philosopher, his name is Jonathan Sachs. Beautiful. He said, this is something that I will never forget. He said, there are three things you can make people do something. Three ways. There's three ways, I'm sorry. Three ways you can make people do something. You can pay them to do it. Okay, that's economics. You can force them to do it. That's politics. Or you can persuade them to do it. That's morality. That's the right way. Meaning, if in your organization, the club you're putting together, some people voluntarily want to give more than the minimum membership fee. Voluntarily. Some people because they feel they can. Great. That's great. But it has to be voluntarily. It has to be, these people must be persuaded, right? But they cannot be forced. because that's, once again, that's politics. When you force people to do stuff that they don't like. That's not the right way, though. That is just not the right way. I mean, think about it. I mean, would you rather be forced to do something, or would you rather be persuaded? Some people, right, would say, well, I'd rather be paid. Right? Okay, well, there you go. That's one way, right, of making you do something that maybe you don't want to do. You get paid for it. But when you're forced, that's not right. That's never morally justifiable. Never ever. Never ever. So these top-down theories, friends, are not only ideological and totalitarian, they're immoral. Immoral. They're absolutely wrong. So, and I'm not rich. I'm not trying to defend the rich. But let me tell you something that it's not evident to me at a bottom level. It's not evident that the rich are trying to oppress me. That's not evident. Maybe it's evident to some of you. It was evident probably to Marx. Um, but I would say it's not evident to most people that, you're out here and you're trying to survive because the rich are after you or something. It's not evident to me. What's evident to me is if I work for a company, I'm not being exploited. And if I feel exploited, you know what? I can quit. I can go and work somewhere else. If so can you. So where's the injustice? Where's the fight? Where's the struggle there between, the rich and the poor? You being the poor, right? I don't see it. I don't see it. The way our society evolved, right? The bottom up way, the organic way, is something like this. This is the reality in America, that it's evident to everybody. Hey, I'm not happy working minimum wage at this place. And I feel like, it sucks because that's my job, right? I get paid the minimum. But I think, maybe I can get paid more doing something different at a different uh, company, or if I develop some skills, maybe I can market myself better and get a much better paid job. This is why people go to school, right? This is why you're in school. You're in school because you want to become a professional. You want to become a professional because you want to make decent money, right? Because as a non-professional, you're not the chances for you to make money and to live a nice, decent living are very slim, but they're better if you're a professional. Okay, so that's our system. There's no rich trying to attack you or abuse you, oppress you. Um, how interesting that most of you, I'm sure, most of you watching, you love Amazon. And if you don't love it, I'm sure you use it regularly. Well, it's convenient, right? You don't have to go out to a store to buy things. You can just order them online from your phone, and that's great. And they can be at your door the next day, right? Don't you love that? Well, that's our system. And because this is our system, you turned somebody into a billionaire, one of the richest men in the world, Jeff Bezos. So what are we going to say now about Jeff Bezos? That he shouldn't exist? That he's not entitled to his money? If you think this way, friends, all I want you to see is that this is a top down. This is an ideological and totalitarian way, an immoral way of looking at society, understanding the issues in our society, and trying to fix things in our society. That's the wrong approach, friends. That was Plato's mistake. So, well, if you're that person who believes in this kind of ideologies and redistribution of wealth and so on, maybe Plato's theory of the state might be appealing to you, and maybe you see yourself as a philosopher, the one who should rule, right? And make everyone and tell everyone else what they should do. What's their place in society? Hmm, okay, surely that's an ideal place to live in. Not sure about that, but anyways, I made this video more about the politics, right? The reality today, and more than about Plato. But because I think this is so important, this is such an important problem in our country that uh, I felt like the need, the responsibility to put together this video and tell you about it. So I hope you take this away with you. Keep this in your mind. Bottom up versus top down. Look at Plato on the screen, pointing upward. That's him. He's the top-down philosopher. He's the ideological totalitarian philosopher. You don't want to be that kind of thinker. You want to be a bottom-up. You want to be a thinker who uh, come up with ideas that are evident, they're good to everybody. You want to be the kind of thinker who points out to things that are wrong for everybody, and they're evidently wrong for everybody, people around you. They would say, yeah, that is absolutely wrong. That's the kind of thinker you want to be. Thinker who makes the truth evident at that level, the ground level. And because that's just that's the moral way. Well, every time I find myself repeating things I already said, I understand it's time to finish the video. So thank you so much for watching. I would love to hear your thoughts on this video. Okay, bye bye. See you next time.